I bet. Well, it's funny. I'm really excited about the first open to kind of see some of the new teams and some of the juniors. A lot of the new folks. The first
Yeah.
time I really get to see them, in that kind of setting. The draft is going to be different for me. Actually, I'm not as involved on camera as I have
Right.
been
Different
overseas,
role.
which I'm sure everyone at home hearing that is now pretty excited that they don't have to watch me as a part of it. But it's
Stop
going to be
it.
different. It's going to be different. It's going to be fun. But I'm interested to see. I talked a little bit about it with Jeff on Borderline last week. How do things start to become a little more regionalized, especially with the captains that are from those areas? And what kind of impact are the U18s going to have on the draft since they've never been allowed? So that's kind of a couple of things I'm looking forward to in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be pretty interesting to see who's going in that round one. Doing the mock draft was difficult. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
there's some obvious picks, but I mean, even in the first round, I felt like there's so many that I was like, how do I fit all these people in the first round? So,
Right.
having to move people around too, it's definitely going to be interesting for sure, and to see how these team captains make their decisions, whether it's on points, whether it's on what happens at the rookie showcase, whether it's regional, what goes into their decisions.
Yeah. I mean, think about all right, so now they keep 5. So you've got half your team's already done, right? Going into the draft, they got to keep 5 of their players from last season plus the captain. So 6 players already done. So once we kind of get through the U18s, I mean, there's some powerful U18s, obviously, and the Alex Hickses, the Jake Gore, Jackson, we could go down the list there. Caleb Batson, I guess, may have turned 18 last season. But then you get through the rookies, obviously, which are going to be very powerful. Where do they go after that? And I figure it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the late second round, early third round, because it's going to be up to the captains. How much research are they going to do? Right? How much are they going to know about all the people that they have to pick from? So it should be interesting.
I agree, but we will find out more about that. We talk about that on Around the ACL, which you can tune in tomorrow. Wally and I are going to actually go through our mock draft on Bagging and Bragging, and I don't know if you guys are touching on it too, but lots of draft content coming this week from the other podcasts. Today, we're going to focus on the Open. We're going to go through our doubles and singles to watch. Remember, just to watch doesn't mean the top 5 of these categories. just people were kind of curious about what's going to happen for various reasons that we'll go through when we get to each one of these. And I have to tell you, Bernie, I had made mine first, then you sent me yours. I had to go back and change some because we had actually a lot of similar ones.
Well, I'm sure. So you could have just, you should have emailed me back and say, got them already. And because I was worried about I was going through it and I was like, well, I can't take all of these people, right? Because I can't take all the quote unquote biggest names, what have you. I figured I had to leave some for you. You should have just had me go back because I had some other people in mind, but I've only got five spots to talk about. So I'm really interested, and I didn't even put them in really. If thinking about my doubles, for example, my 5. If I look back on it when I put it in, there's some new teams that I'm really interested in seeing play that I didn't put in there because there's only so much space. So it's interesting. Season has begun. It's fun.
Season has begun. Yeah, the off season was a blip, and here we are.
Yeah.
It's
couple long weekends, and we're back.
Yeah, exactly. I guess for me, it actually did feel like a bit of a break. I don't know if the players feel that way, but I felt like I got a little bit of a break.
Oh, for sure.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will get started on our doubles teams to watch right after this. Welcome back, everyone. It is time to go into our doubles. So we're going to start with Bernie's teams to watch. Bring it up here for you, Bernie. What, you all ready? Were you not ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm just saying,
Okay.
here we go. First one of the season. Kind of crazy. But here we
Let's
are,
go.
Trevor Brooks, Berkeley pair. I think everyone knows it. Everyone knows me, knows that I'm one of the biggest Trevor Brooks fans in our game. I think his passion, and I think his dedication to the sport are things that a lot of other people could copy. Obviously, sometimes, like a lot of people, passion gets the best of them, but doesn't matter. To me, I, I'd pay to watch Trevor Brooks play. I'd pay to be there, and he's paired up with Berkeley Pair, someone he's had really big
It'll be
success
real
with.
boring.
Yeah, very quiet, but I love it. I mean, I do. I love it. I love. I mean, look, if you're calling a game or you're sitting at a match where Trevor Brooks is and he's playing, whether it be singles and doubles, you feel tension, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because he's so intense and he makes other people intense and he brings the heightened sense of the game. I love it, and I'm excited to see how they do in Rock Hill.
Oh yeah, I think everyone's gonna kind of be curious about how this is gonna play out. And last season ending a little bit controversial for Trevor. So how does he come back this season? He's a really good guy. I think that it's easy to get wrapped up in some of the drama that happens, but if you talk to him, like he's just so passionate, which, like you said, sometimes gets the best of him. But really wants to do well, really wants to be better in all ways. And I think just a really fun person to watch for so many reasons.
Absolutely. And, moving on to number 2, I chose this one, Jordan Kimbrell, Blaine Rozier. I think I thought Blaine really played well at the end of last season. I thought he was really kind of coming to his own as someone that was kind of climbing the ranks in the pro division. And then Jordan Kimbrell is not that far removed from being a top 25 professional in singles. You get him on his home turf, being from that region. Do I think they're going to win? Probably not. Can they make a long run? Absolutely. And so I want to see. I want to see. Blaine for me last season it was Blaine's airmail. Like that, he just got that dialed in, and I watched him play probably 4 or 5 times towards the end of last season, and he was really getting it dialed in, and I thought he made huge strides. So you get him, you get Jordan playing in his backyard. I'm all about it.
Yeah, I think they both have been on everyone's kind of radar, and you've heard their names come out of all of our mouths. So I think it's definitely a team worth checking out.
And then number 3, a team that really struggled last season. Really just seemed couldn't find a way to keep it together. I mean, obviously Caleb Batts and Eddie Grindersleeve winning the last 2 nationals and the world championship. And then when you took them apart, Eddie wins the co-ed world championship. Caleb Batson, if I'm not mistaken, goes on and wins the Pro Invitational in a mixed doubles format. Just 2 guys at the second half of the season last year that truly dominated doubles. And I actually heard someone try to explain to me that it really wasn't the case because they didn't play. I was like, they won the last 2 nationals and they won the world championship. Tell me how that's not dominating.
Yeah, what more do you need?
Yeah, like give me. I mean, I understand maybe an open here or something somewhere, but when the money was on the line and the big competitions, there just wasn't a better duo. So that being said, we've turned the page. Right? It's now 23-24 season. How hard will it be for them to continue that kind of dominance? I'm not sure. Like we talked about this, all right, last season, for example, when we talked about Mark Richards, can he have that kind of season again going into the beginning of last season? And I feel like we have to say that now about Eddie and Caleb going in as a doubles team. Like will they be able to even, if you come close to last season as a doubles team, that's just astronomical. It's amazing. Number 4.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I'll say is you said they hold on one second. One thing I just want to say is that you think that I mean you talked about how they did good the back half of the season. And let's just keep in mind, that's because Caleb graduated high school. Like, that's when it all turned around, and he has continued graduated. So, you think about imagine if the first half of the season he was out of school already and how that would have played out. I mean, now here he is. He's had this little bit of time off. He's only focused on cornhole. He dominated the last half of the season as soon as he did. I think it's scary.
I think that's a great point. That's since you bring it up, it's not something I've really thought about, but what a difference, right? I mean, graduation, let's say that, you're not the valedictorian. Does graduation matter? Sure it does. You've got your family around. There's all this stuff going on that's kind of, life is kind of in the way of other things, right? So I think that's a great point. Like once he was able to graduate and focus on his game, how much better. I mean, he was playing pretty well beforehand.
Yeah.
Right. So how much better he was able to focus and play, and play. I think on the singles side, he's another player. I mean, gosh, he finished top 10. I mean, obviously the next step is to win a national as a singles player, which he was very close to. Had some deep runs, had some amazing matches in bracket finals. I'm interested to see if he can kind of take that next step in singles. But I don't know. Seriously, Mish, what do you think? What do you think a season for these two guys, like how is it possible to match last season?
I don't know. Well, we didn't think Mark Richards would, and obviously he did pretty
Right.
good.
That's a
So
really good point. Yeah.
hard to say. I think what I love, and I asked this on around the ACL, which you guys will see tomorrow. We found out that Adam and Cody broke up, and I asked Trey. I said, "What's our longest standing partnership now?" And Eddie and Caleb are on season 4 together, and that's rare in our league. And I
Wow.
think there's a lot to say about the fact that they are staying together and have been since the beginning. They have amazing chemistry. There's this sort of mentor mentee type of role, but now Caleb's full-time cornhole. So there's a lot going for them aside just from their amazing talent on the boards. Like, as someone who's looking at it from all angles, I think there's just a lot going in their favor, and it shows.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that point you made that I think is a really good one about, the sticking together and kind of finding your way through, right? There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. It seems like so many times, especially now and with bag manufacturers trying to put together super teams, all of those kind of distractions, it seems almost impossible for teams to stay together more than a season or two now. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really cool that they've been able to do that. And I think it's obviously, to your point again, it helps having that mentor mentee relationship, right? I think there's a bond there that kind
Yeah,
of, that goes beyond cornhole.
absolutely.
Number 4, I think this is a very interesting pairing going into this season. Jackson Gore, Sammy Soto. Now, I'm going to ask you this question before we get to Jackson. A lot of us have talked about Sammy Soto possibly being rookie of the year, putting a lot of pressure on the young man. Do you think that's going to have a positive or negative effect on Sammy?
So I haven't experienced Sammy too much, but the little experience I have of him, he doesn't seem to have much emotion. So it's hard to imagine that he would be like real taken aback or shook by something like this, kind of like a Justin Burton Jr., that kind of like low key, I'm just here throwing bags. You're not getting a lot, at least the limited time I've seen him throw. So that could be wrong. That could have been that one tournament or 2 tournaments, but that's my experience of him.
Yeah, I think he's. It would not surprise me. I mean, I guess it's hard to have a breakout player not be a rookie, considering most of our breakout players are players that were already pros that kind of made a big jump in one season. But I expect just from talent. I remember the first time I got to watch 2 full matches in a row from Sammy, and I looked at somebody I was sitting with, and I was like, "That's a top 30 player."
Mm-hmm.
He'll learn to get there. Is he there right this second? But just bag talent, arm talent. It just struck me as that's a kid that's a top 30 player. Now, other side of the team, Jackson Gore, as young as he is, he and his twin brother are kind of old heads at this.
Yeah,
Even
I know.
being 15, they've been around. They've been around for a while. And I think Jake having such huge success, especially at the beginning of last season, but having just such massive success, I think Jackson is on a mission this season.
Well, and
You know,
history would show that this is Jackson's year because they seem to flip flop.
right?
So
No,
who knows?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, I know he's happy for his brother, but I mean, we talked about last season at this very time, going into last year, I think a lot of people felt that Jackson may have been the little bit better singles player. And
Yeah.
then to find that not being the case at all last season, I think Jackson is on a mission to really, set a new standard for himself in the pro division. You put him with a player like Sammy Soto, and this is going to sound crazy, but the 15-year-old is kind of the mentor in
Yeah,
this
go
relationship.
figure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like someone that's been through the wars of the pro division, someone that knows what it's like, someone that knows, how rough it can be sometimes to come back, through the elimination bracket, not to get too worried if you have one bad game, a guy that's going to be kind of a settling piece to
Mhm.
that partnership. So I think that's fascinating.
Agreed. Looking forward to it.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Number 5. I would be remiss if you didn't bring up the guys, right? You have
I had him
Matt
on my
Guy.
list originally.
Yeah. I wondered actually when I was putting him down, I was like, she's going to have him if I don't have him. So I was
Yeah.
thinking about getting somebody else, but how do you look, a dominant pairing whenever they play together. Obviously the last few years, Matt Guy playing with Jamie Graham, Brett Guy playing with Eric Davis, the whole fire cornhole thing. I, you know, I think these two guys are wanting, truly chomping at the bit to play together as a doubles team.
Yeah.
I,
Totally. I mean, that's
I
what they
mean,
say.
yeah, I think they really have taken some of what's gone on the last season personal in a way, about not finishing where they wanted to. People like me talking about how Matt Guy, he's kind of dropped down, dropped down all the way to the backside of the top 20, right?
Yeah.
Which is considering the talent in
Unbelievable.
today's, yeah, not that bad. But for who he is and what he's meant to the sport, that's a pretty long dip for him. And I think he's going to take this season personal. I think Brett's going to take this season personal. And I think when they're playing together, obviously personal. And I think there's two guys that relish being on a court and people wanting to boo them or root against them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could totally see that. And I actually asked Matt if he's working on any additional shots. We talk a lot about the 5-tool player. And he said that maybe Brett might be teaching him a little bit of something. So I love that he's open to his son, someone younger than him, being open to him being taught and to learn from him. Whereas we know, obviously, Brett's been learning from Matt. So I like the
Right.
kind of role reversal there that Matt's doing. And I think that gives a lot of confidence to Brett to say, like, hey, I can teach my dad, the GOAT, a couple tricks too. And I like that. I like that relationship between the two of them a lot, obviously. The father-son
Yeah. I mean,
dynamic. I think it
if
works for
Matt
him.
Yeah, if Matt figures out one or two more shots and continues to be, the highest PPR guy in the game for the last 2 years, if he continues that and then you give him a couple more shots, does he take that step back into the top 10 and back to his dominant stature in the game? I don't know. It should be interesting, but I'm really, really excited to watch him open number 1.
Absolutely. All right, take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go over my double teams to watch. Welcome back, everyone. We went through Bernie's doubles teams to watch, and now we will look at mine. So, first off, we have the Texas boys and rookie Braden Wilson, AJ Sims. You could say a similar kind of dynamic to a Caleb Batson, Eddie Grindersleeve. You have the older, more experienced player, older in our league is 30s,
Right.
and then. To be clear, and then Braden Wilson, rookie season, young kid, and a really great player. I think this could have a similar kind of dynamic that we saw with Eddie and Caleb, when they first started. I don't remember what their first season was like together, but I don't think it was horribly bad. So I think that we could see a similar kind of trajectory from these guys, and I think they'll have a lot of synergy. So looking forward to watching how Braden performs on the big stage now that he's a pro and how they work together.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I almost put him on my list. We may have almost had the exact same list at one point, probably. But
Yeah, right.
Seriously, AJ Sims, I think, is perfect for Braden Wilson. AJ's pretty chill, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's going to show you a little emotion when he's not happy with how he's playing, but not much. And he's never going to be the kind of guy, that when his partner's not playing their best, he's not going to be a roll your eyes at your partner choices kind of guy, right?
No, he'll pick him up.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect for Braden Wilson. I mean, Braden is a super, super talented player, but human being, and there's going to be moments this season where it's just not clicking, right? He's a human being. It's going to happen. I think AJ is the perfect partner to get him through those moments. So I love that pick.
Next up, we have Tanner Halbert and Jacob Trzynski. Very curious. Both these guys do get fired up for sure. I think that as much as I love Tanner and Easy together, I think they had different ways in which they handled defeat. Then I think that Tanner and Jacob handled defeat similarly, which might work a little bit better because I know for me, like if I'm not playing well, and I don't get pissed off and frustrated. And so that could be interpreted like I don't care. Right. And even though I do, it's just not how I experience defeat. And I think Tanner, you see it. If he's not playing well, he's going to walk off and be mad. He's going to be frustrated. Jacob's the same way. I feel like Tony Smith had a little bit of a different reaction to not playing well that was different than Jacob. So I feel like these two together will have a similar kind of energy or vibe that may work really well together, or it's like fuel to a fire. I'm not entirely sure if it goes positive or negative, but they're both phenomenal players. So I see it playing out well.
Yeah, I'll get to Tanner more as we go into our singles. My only concern with these two is bags, and you know me, I'm not like Mister What bag are they playing and what bag are they throwing, but just to me, just two different styles of game. What kind of bag do they decide on that fits both of their games well? Because Tanner's old school. Tanner's slide airmail, right? I mean, like but he
Yeah, but
has
Tanner
upper.
can.
Oh yeah,
He can roll and stuff. I think they'll adapt fairly well. I'm not too concerned about the bags like I would be if it was like a Matt Guy and Jacob Trzynski with, it's so not in Matt's wheelhouse to have that style of bag. But I think with these two, I don't think it's as far off as some people may think.
And look, if you get them, yeah, no, I'm sorry. One more point.
No, go ahead.
If you get them both hot, I mean that's a team that can win a national, right? I mean
absolutely
it's that good of a team. So if they've got that figured out and they're both hot, they're going to do some real damage.
Yep. Austin Cameron, Caden Allen. What a fun team to watch. Talking about the style of play they have, which is one that I truly enjoy to watch. Caden Allen being one of the top rookies that everyone's got their eyes on, had a phenomenal last season as a non-pro, was offered a PDC spot, turned it down, and wanted to be 18 this season coming in to get that pro spot without having to be in that U18 category. And I think just really curious. He's had open success. He's won an open. He does really well in the advanced brackets. And then how do they work together? And how does Caden do on his first open of his pro season?
I think this is another interesting selection. I think it's so funny in our game. We're one of the few sports that you can be a rookie, but have played forever.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like, and these are accomplished guys that are joining up in this. I, I love Austin's game. I think Austin loves big games. Like, he's the kind of guy
Yeah.
that if he's going to have a bad moment, it might be in the middle of a tournament on an outer court where he might lose focus just a touch. But if he can make it to a big court, I think he's all about it. I think he wants the smoke, as they would say. So I'm interested to see how this plays out.
Next up, Gina Ramirez and Chris Roybal, some Arizona players. Gina had her big breakout moment at the shootout in Arizona. And then Chris Roybal, I can't actually remember which event it was that I was watching him on the live streaming court for a couple games. Really unique throw. We started calling him the snake because of what his arm does when he throws. And it started actually a whole movement around this snake type of brand for him. So, I think it's one of those things that like Anthony would have is like a nightmare for him because of the mechanics that are just crazy
Right.
and all this extra movement, and it works. It just works for him. So love to see these two together. I know Chris is definitely a player in Arizona that everybody respects, and this is his rookie season, and this is going to be an important open for him.
I'm interested to see how Gina handles her second season. There was a lot of success for her. There was a lot of light shown down upon her in her first season as a professional with the ACL. And I just, we've seen it in the past that people kind of enjoy that light a little bit and then maybe lose a little bit of focus, on what got them to that light, if you will. And so I'm curious to see, because I love her game. I love her wanting to be in a big moment. I love that about her. So I really want to see her play well this season.
Yeah, and she wasn't even starting out as a pro last season. She was
Right.
PDC and got moved up. So this will be her first full pro
Yeah.
season. So we'll see how that plays out. And then my last one is Jacob Gore, Devin Harbaugh. What a scary team to walk up against on the boards. That is not somebody that I would want to
Right.
have in my bracket. That's pretty scary. So I feel like this is going to be this would be the obvious pick to win, in my opinion. But we'll see how they play together and how it shows out in this first open. Devin Harbaugh is one of those guys that, Jacob and Devin met up in finals more than once. Devin's always right there, but he can't seem to get that finish. Well, he has an opens, but not in the nationals yet. It's just, can he finish? Can he get that win at the very end?
This will be a fun pairing this weekend, right? Sometimes I think, some of us have talked about, I'd rather see, if possible, pro teams play in opens as well. Because I just don't think in any way having more bags hurts. Right.
Right.
But
Right.
It is fun in opens to get pairings like this. Right. If you get Devin doing what Devin Harbaugh can do, you get Jake doing what he can do, especially in kind of a home region. I'm with you. You've got to figure they're in the top 4. Right?
Yeah. Be shocking if they weren't, and you'd be like, who took them out?
Right. So that's going to be a lot of fun to check out inside the Rock Hill Sports and Events Center.
Absolutely. So those are my Devils teams to watch. We will take a break. When we come back, we'll go through our singles, starting off with Bernie right after this. is time to go through singles. Bernie, we're going to start off with yours. And here it is. Take it away.
Here we go. Yeah, Jamie Graham, number one right there on my list to watch. Obviously, coming off, I mean, it's funny, we're talking about a new season, but it really wasn't all that long ago that he won a world championship in that building.
No
So
big deal.
I like a lot of people that I've spoken with. I think, I feel like Jamie obviously went through what he went through last year. He had some ups and downs on the boards, off the boards, but I feel like he started believing he was Jamie Graham again towards the end of the season. And
Found his groove, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah, and for a guy as talented as he is, you're talking about a five-tool player, if you will. If he starts to believe how good he is again, then you're talking about a guy that is going to be in the top five. You're talking about a guy that's always a threat to win any tournament he even thinks about joining. So I get him back in the same building after a world championship. Confidence is high. He's my if I had to have a betting favorite for this weekend, Jamie Graham would be my favorite going in.
Agreed. He was also on my list. That's one that I did remove after I saw yours. Definitely, I mean, there's something about Jamie and that building, which Trey goes into pretty deep detail on around the ACL. It's kind of fascinating to hear all the stats around Jamie playing specifically there. But just coming off the World Championship, gonna be finish the season on a high. I think that he's dangerous coming into this room this weekend.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I believe it was was it Open number one last year where he won doubles with Chad Hunt? Am I remembering that correctly? My brain escapes me, but I mean, I obviously Opens
say that one more
number
time.
one. I believe it was number one last season that he won with Chad Hunt, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I know they. Yeah.
Yeah, singles and doubles. Both.
Yep. So he likes getting out of the blocks early, so that's why I've got him on my list. Number two, Tanner Halbert. We talked a little bit about it when you mentioned, the doubles teams that you wanted to watch with Jacob Trzynski. I think Tanner Halbert is on that short list of pros that has a ton to prove this season. They all do. They all want to play well. They all want to have their best season. But Tanner Halbert's a guy that's been at the top of the game. He knows what it's like to live, at a very high level within the sport of cornhole. And he didn't really have that last season. You're talking about a player that finished just inside the top 80, and he's too good for that. Quite simply, I think he knows he's too good for that. So I think Tanner has a lot to prove and might as well start with open number one.
I totally agree. And I also feel like Tanner needs to have a balance of, yes, he's a phenomenal player and he has other stuff going on in his life. He has a job and a family and stuff. So not putting pressure on himself and just saying, hey, I need to do my absolute best. And that's way better than so many people, which is crazy because I don't do this full time, and allow that kind of confidence to play through without putting pressure on the fact that he's not able to do it as often as a lot of these people. So I hope he can find that balance of being like giving himself some grace, but also being, hungry.
Yeah. My next two selections we can kind of talk about together in a way. I put Ryan Trader and Braden Wilson as my 3 and 4 players to kind of keep an eye on. Some young rookie players that have an enormous amount of talent. And, obviously they're used to playing against a lot of these folks when they play in regionals and conference events or just around, they'll travel and play. So a lot of these guys, they're, even though they're young, they're used to playing against pros, but there is something different about doing it as a pro.
Yeah.
And
no kidding.
You know what I mean? It's hard to explain to someone the difference. Like, I've seen players that they were advanced, or however whatever you want to put them in, whatever the name for that division is. They qualify to become a pro. They're used to playing these pros, right?
Yep.
They know what it's like. But then once you do it as a pro with a target on your back, especially in opens as a pro, it changes things. Now, it'll be the first time they're going through this. And to be so young and to have to go through this process at such a young age, in some ways is great because you don't have the same fears and anxieties at that age that you do as an adult. But the flip side of that's true too. Some adults just realize, hey, it's just this, it's just that. And sometimes for a kid, every bag is the most important thing they've ever done. Right. So I'm really, really interested to see how they play. Ryan Trader, I didn't know much about until I got to see him play a few times. And then especially in Rock Hill at the World Championships, I kind of hid a little bit and watched his game. I watched him play against Sammy Soto. I can't remember if that was junior singles or junior USA singles where they were playing against each other, and it was fascinating to watch him play because he's a super high talent level kid, and I really can't wait to see how he plays as a pro in the first Open.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I wish I would have looked this up, but I didn't think of it till just now. Like, how did Justin Burton Jr. do in those first opens? Because obviously at the first national, he was incredible.
Right.
As a rookie coming into the difficult pro only series. But I wonder how he did in the opens before that. And maybe people in the chat remember. But
Yeah.
just because that, I think that would be interesting to look at because you're looking at this is the first event of your pro season. The Nationals has way more pressure and weight, I think, than an Open because you've probably
Sure.
played in Opens before. But how did that affect Justin Burton Jr. for him to come out so dominant in that national? And was he dominant in all the Opens as well? Or did he have to have a couple of events before he kind of found his footing? Or I would just be curious to know how that played out. And I can't remember.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Braden Wilson, obviously my number 4 there. Same thing with Ryan. Braden already, the beauty of the Junior USA singles, for the World Championships, these guys getting a chance to play on the main stage, getting a chance to play on the broadcast court, because that's the goal. You get into the pro division,
Yep.
that's your goal. You want to be on that court. So I'm just. We talked about in doubles having kind of, I think, a perfect partner. I think you think as well in AJ Sims. But all right, let's see how it is now as a professional, how it is as a singles player. And the kid's got, for his age, I think he's very mature for his age in some
Yeah.
ways. And
Yeah.
I think that's something he can lean on. But I'm excited to see both of them play at this level.
I also wonder too how much they look at someone like Alex Hicks as,
Mm,
can I live up to that kind of season, that
hmm
kind of reputation, him being a young player, baby goat. Does that something they aspire to do, and does that add pressure? Does that just excite them? What do they look at as Alex Hicks as kind of the mentor in a way, as well as the Gores and kids like that who have been there before them?
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. That's a great point. Number 5 on my list, Cheyenne Bubenheim. Not for the reason that most people think. Obviously, everyone knows I'm a big Cheyenne fan. I should have put Cameron Belvin with her in my number 5. I'm just curious to how they're going to play as their pregnancy goes on.
Not a
You
lot
know,
of mobility.
yeah, I mean, and depending how your pregnancy goes, this as a mom, some are good and some are awful,
Yeah.
right? And if you're having issues, how is that going to affect you as a player trying to push through that? I would imagine, I don't know, hopefully you can kind of shed some light. I would imagine it's got to change your throw.
I it depends, I guess. I don't
I mean,
know.
I mean, as far as leaning forward and
It's
having that extra weight there, I don't know. I'm curious. I have no idea. Obviously, I never will. So I wonder how that's going to play for both of those ladies as they go forward, and then not only during their pregnancy, after they give birth, because it's going to be a rough go of it as far as sleep and rest and all those kinds of things. So that's why I've got Cheyenne on my list, not necessarily as a player talent wise. I think we all know who she is as a player on the courts, on the boards. I'm curious to see how pregnancy affects her game.
I mean, I taught a lot of yoga towards the end of my pregnancy, and I felt like energy-wise, I was fine. The beginning was rough, but, like, the first trimester is rough, but after that, energy-wise, I feel like I was fine. I was teaching actually quite a few classes, so I feel like that's a physical thing that I think is somewhat relatable to cornhole, but my days weren't as long, I'll say that much. But,
Right.
in terms of, mobility, that's the only thing I wonder because, you see I remember how I sat down, stood up, kind of waddled around. So, I think that they're so good at what they do, it won't affect them at all. But I do think that they probably have made some unconscious adjustments to their physical throw to get around that, but they're probably going to be just fine.
And I think, another pro that's been through this, Rosie Streaker has been through this a
Yep.
few times. So that's another pro that they can kind of lean on as someone that went through this while playing. So
Yeah, she said it was a non-issue. So, I
yeah,
mean, Rosie setting the tone.
yeah, Rosie's a beast.
Yeah, twins too. I mean, that is something I can't even fathom. So I think Cheyenne and Cameron will be just fine. I think that they're playing with another level of excitement with that baby. I think you can look at the positive spin they have being pregnant. There's something really special about that whole process that I think could actually help them.
That's such a good point, and I think adding to that is how much this puts things in perspective,
Yeah.
right? You're getting ready to give birth to a child. You've created another human being. I think that puts a bad shot in perspective, right? Like how important really is that? Considering what I'm getting
Especially
ready to
after you have
do.
the baby.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Another commercial break. We'll come back. We'll go through my singles list right after this. Last little section here. We're going to go through my singles, and here we go. First one I have is Ethan Walker. I feel like Ethan Walker is one of those players that, high ceiling, not low floor, but just we see a floor. So
Right.
I'm not always positive what we're going to get, but when he's at his ceiling, can beat literally anybody. So it's always interesting to watch him to see which player you're going to get and if you're going to get a consistent ceiling across the tournament, in which case, watch out. It's going to be very scary. And I think he has even, I remember did he beat Tony Smith or almost beat Tony Smith at the, I can't remember which event that was. But I think it was a national actually. And afterwards it was like, he just kind of will go for some shots that he knows he shouldn't go for, but it's kind of a hindsight thing and gives up a round. And then that's kind of the downward spiral. So wondering if, he's a young player, wondering if in this offseason, this very short offseason, if he has kind of looked at that and looked back at film and looked at some of those mistakes in which he had the game and then made some decisions that kind of gave it away, and if that's kind of matured or changed into this next season.
I think that's a great point. I mean, watching Ethan play, it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, you see top elite level talent, shot making ability, up there with the best in the game, but the decisions. Sometimes the decisions, like you said, they kind of got in his way, and and then and not so much the decision in one round. It's allowing that decision to then bother him for 2 or 3 rounds, and then things have gotten away from him. Sometimes against the elite players, I, uh, I'm with you. If he can fix that, and kind of realize that you don't have to go for the biggest shot all the time.
Yeah,
Sometimes
and if you
giving yeah, go ahead.
I was right. So, and if you look at the top players, you'll notice that a lot of times they will give up one or take a one versus the big opportunity.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. Sometimes, it's okay to give up 2 sometimes,
Yeah.
right? I mean, unless you're put into a really bad place, giving up 2 isn't the worst than going after a shot. All of a sudden, you've given up a 5. Things change. And I just learning. But see, that's part of like being a pro's pro, don't you think? Is that kind
Yeah.
of maturation process as a player?
Oh, I definitely think so. I mean, there's sort of phases in your level of play, obviously getting mechanics down, getting the mental game down, and then it becomes strategy and decision making, being really, really smart on the boards, knowing
Hmm.
when to go for things, knowing when to pull back, knowing the kind of law of averages, the percentages of shots, and also thinking about the fact that the person you're playing against is most likely not going to make every bag in. So it's
Right,
very
right.
rare. So if you give up 2, the chances that you get that 2 back are pretty high, which then becomes a wash. So
Hmm.
I think it's just sort of remembering those kinds of things and not getting caught up in the moment of, oh, there's an opportunity, but then how many points would it cost you if you miss? And yes, be confident in your talent and your ability, but yeah, is it going to be worth it in the end?
Agreed.
Next up, Tommy Sliker. This is a name that I'm not super familiar with his game. I don't know if I've seen him play. I've just heard the name. I've heard a lot of talk about him, and so I want to see what he's about. And have you seen him play a lot?
I have not. So I saw this name like just when you pulled it up, and I was like, all right, she must know something I don't. So I like the fact that you're saying, you know what, I don't know enough. I want to see you play because I'm kind of that way too. I mean, there's a few names on that list that I'm like, I don't really know who that person is or what their game's all about. So and we're all really good at kind of sneaking around the floor. You may not see us, but we're usually sneaking around, taking peeks in at matches. So that's that's a cool name to draw out. Was it any particular reason?
So when we were looking at those mock draft type of things, I noticed Anthony had him in there. And
Mm,
it definitely piqued my interest. Like, okay, who's Tommy Sliker? Like, why is he on the radar? Because I've not seen him play. And the other thing is that, you said we'll kind of go around the courts and check on people, but I want to see, does this name that now I've seen some hype behind make it to the live stream courts, and how does he do on the live stream courts? And
mm.
maybe he's been there before and I missed it. That's very possible. But going into this open as a pro, is that a name we see make it to the end there? And if so, how does that performance play out?
I like it. I like that pick.
Pat Sem is someone that I have seen play. The first time, I think it was at Worlds 2 years ago. And I walked up and I can't remember who he was playing, but he just hit every airmail you would. I think he made them all. Like, I don't think he missed one airmail. And I was like, who is this guy? And I found out he's local to the area in the Carolinas,
Hmm.
and people definitely knew who he was. And that was 2 years ago. And then last year at Worlds, or this past Worlds, obviously did just as good, earned himself a pro spot. Same thing, just ridiculous airmails, makes a lot of bags in the hole, high PPR guy. And so I've actually had him on my radar for a couple of years. I'm like, this guy's crazy good. His airmail is crazy, and now he's a pro, and I think it's well deserved. And I want to see how that plays out as now having that pro card.
It's interesting. You have a player like that, like in the Carolinas, people knew who he was. right? Like
Yeah.
that's not a name. Like everyone knew who he was. They knew his game. And there's a lot of players in the Carolinas you could say this about that are, for whatever reason, either just had never wanted to go pro, don't have, time constraints, what have you. Right. But there's a lot of top talent. I think Travis Purser may be the first to kind of open the door to say, you know what? We've been kind of, laying back here watching some of the big dogs in the Carolinas run for a while. It's our turn now, right? And so we're all going to come up and play in the pro division, and I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of damage he can do. So I love that's a sick call.
Then the easy one, Tony Smith. What's Tony Smith gonna do? He's somewhat good. He's okay.
He's an all right player.
MVP, number one player in the world. He's going to have different bags, but I remember talking to him last season when we were talking about bags. I think I was just mentioning some, what if that you get this bag sponsor? What if you get this bag sponsor? Him being with Contraband at the time, he told me he loves the Lucky line. So the fact that he was saying that before he even had that sponsorship on the table, he likes his bags. And I feel like Tony Smith being already so good and then him feeling super confident and loving his bags, that's dangerous.
Yeah, that's part of that whole Brat Pack cornhole thing, right? Like so many of those guys play together out in Airmail City. Obviously, Mike has a relationship out there as well. Mike Hennessy, Lucky Bag. So there's a lot of guys playing a lot of different bags when they're kind of screwing around out there. So that was pretty lucky for Mike to already kind of have a hand in. Like, hey, just try him, man. Just throw him around a little bit, see what you think. But Tony Smith, the one thing I want to see is I felt there was about, like, if you want to take the pro season into thirds, I thought Tony was the dominant player in the middle third of the season.
Okay.
I thought
Yeah.
towards the end, the last third, he kind of reverted back a little bit to his old style. Because, if you remember the beginning, the front half, and especially middle third of the season, he was running backs. I mean, he was
Yeah.
literally he was running backs hole for hole, and then he would hit you with some crazy shots. I think he kind of reverted back to his old style a little bit towards the end of the season, and it may have cost him. I mean, as well as he played, it's kind of hard to say this, but it may have cost him a national or a world championship, to be honest. So
I don't
I'm
know.
curious. Go ahead.
I hear I hear what you're saying, but I also feel like that was brought on by board conditions. I think his intention
Sure.
was to run bags, and the boards weren't working with the bags at the time. At least we saw the broadcast court a couple times. You could hear him if you were watching the ESPN broadcaster. You could hear him say, "They're skipping, they're hopping, they won't cut."
Yeah.
Like, so he was getting frustrated with the combination of the boards and the bags. And when Tony gets like that, when he starts to feel like my shots just aren't happening, they're not connecting, and it's not like I'm releasing differently or I need to fix something. It's like it's boards and bags. It's something I think almost a kind of a helpless feeling. Like, what can I do about that? That's when things tend to spiral for him. And that didn't happen until the broadcast court with different boards. He always got to the broadcast. So I do wonder if the bags will play a role in this. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not that familiar with the Contraband line to say how it compares to what he would be throwing with Lucky. But if that gets cleaned up where he doesn't have any issues with board bag combinations, then I see no issues going forward. And then lastly, Jackson Gore, you brought him up in doubles playing with Sammy Soto. I just want to see if Jackson can work through some of the emotional stuff that happened as a result of the dog bite last season. It really messed with him, as it should, and he was having a lot of nerve damage, residual things happening, and he was dealing with a lot. That's a lot to deal with for an adult. That's so much for a child to deal with who doesn't have necessarily the same set of tools as an adult would to deal with these kinds of things. And so my heart just goes out to what could have possibly been happening in that little child's body. As a parent, that's all I can think about. And so I hope that he was able to find some healing and really find himself feeling strong going into this next season. And whether that involves something like going to therapy or finding some kind of way to work through what happened to him, I hope that he found some relief there, and not just for cornhole, but for his general well-being, because he's such a sweet, amazing kid.
Yeah, like I said before, he's one of the, not only for this tournament coming up, for the entire season, he's one of the players that I really am going to keep a close eye on, because if you get him back, to me, there's really not much difference when you look with him and his brother as far as talent goes. So if you get both those guys playing at their elite level, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Absolutely. Well, we made it through, Barney. Our first open is happening this weekend in Rock Hill. There's definitely going to be lots of fun streaming to watch, the draft to watch, and we'll keep you updated on what's occurring in the rookie showcase as well, and how that plays into the draft decisions. I'm sure those stats will be available once we get them. But looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing everyone. I do have some ACL staff withdrawals when it goes too long. So excited to see everybody and all the players. And we hope to see you guys there. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.